Okay, so let's talk about one of the real heavyweight fights taking place this weekend. A real fight between two real British heavyweights. No monkey business circus show. Of course, I'm talking about Fabio Wardley versus David Adeleye for the British heavyweight title. And now, yeah, a little bit of a facetious opener by your boy, because I was kind of in two minds as to whether I wanted to do a video on this fight because of the undercard that's taking place on. I didn't want to give any attention, any energy towards that circus. But then I thought, you know what? Rather than ignoring the whole thing, I will pick out the parts that deserve the recognition because they don't hold up what we want to see. If anything, this is exactly what we want to see in this fight. We want to see two young guys, both on the up, roll the dice, lay it all out on the line, and see who comes out on top. And as I say, that's what I feel we have in this fight between Fabio Wardley, who's British champion, and David Adeleye. And now I've got to be honest, I don't know if this is going to be my most concise breakdown and prediction, purely because I'm having a hard time splitting these two. I have been mightily impressed by Fabio Wardley. I have a lot of admiration for him because he's someone who, as we famously know, didn't have an amateur background. He quite strangely came from the white collar boxing scene, which, if you're not familiar with white collar boxing, it's dire. It's dire. The quality, let me put it like this: a low quality amateur is probably still 5 to 10 times better than a low quality white collar boxer. Okay, that's how bad it is. But Fabio Wardley came from that, and I believe he didn't even have that many white collar fights. But he has managed to become British champion, and I didn't have my channel at this time, but I remember the first time I saw Fabio Wardley, and I want to say it was probably around 2018, 2019 kind of time, because I actually just came across a video of him by accident. I was scrolling through Instagram. I think I might have told this story before. And just on the explore page, I saw this big, 6'5" heavyweight, and he was hitting the pads, and he looked like something special. I was thinking, damn, this guy's athletic. I want to keep an eye on him. And then slowly but surely, he started to creep into the professional boxing scene, and it got to a point, I want to say around the Simon Vallily Richard Latte fight, so about 3 years ago. And I was like, you know what? If this guy doesn't win a British title, I'd be surprised. I just had this feeling that Fabio Wardley would get there sooner or later, like British title at least. I saw a lot of talent. I saw a lot of athleticism, and I was absolutely stunned when I found out he had no amateur career. That being said, as I say, I've got a lot of admiration for Fabio Wardley, and I've found his career thus far to be a very entertaining ride. And credit to him, because he's fought some guys who are, they have real pedigree. Michael Coffey, a bit more of an advanced age to put it kindly, but a decent fighter. I believe he had some decent amateur career. Michael Coffey, was he like a Golden Gloves champion or something like that? I may be mistaken, but I believe he has some kind of amateur credentials. Nathan Gorman, decent amateur and a decent pro. Nick Webb, same thing. Eric Molina, former heavyweight contender. Richard Latte had been in there with Daniel Dubois. Simon Vallily, I believe, was actually a decent amateur. Wasn't he on Team GB or the England squad? One or two. But what I'm trying to say is Fabio Wardley has done a pretty good job, all things considered. He's been in with a good level of opposition, and he's done fantastically well given his experience. So, yeah, when it comes to Fabio Wardley, I think he deserves a pat on the back, and he deserves some major credit. And I can't really complain too much regarding the direction of his career and the results. However, that doesn't absolve the fact that he's still a work in progress. I look at Fabio Wardley, One moment I'm saying, damn, this guy's good, all things considered. And then the next moment I'm saying, oh, that's a little bit rough around the edges. You know, he's going to have to be careful when he steps up. And as I say, I mean, as you guys have seen, up to this point, Fabio Wardley's been able to always pull it out the bag. And he's kind of known for this rage mode that he has. You know, you get certain games where you build up a meter, you know, like Kratos in God of War, you build up your Ghost of Sparta meter, and then you can just go into rage mode and you do like double damage, but you take none. That's kind of like what Fabio Wardley goes into, and he's in his toughest moments, his roughest moments, he's been able to pull it out the bag. But it's kind of like car crash television, because you're thinking every fight, what happens if he does this against the wrong guy and he just gets cleaned out? So, very entertaining road. David Adeleye, on the other hand, I've kept an eye on him for a couple of years now. And I've got to be honest, I've never been that impressed. I've never thought, oh, this guy's rubbish, he's useless. But there's this, I don't know, there's no X factor there. And that doesn't necessarily mean that he can't go on to become the best in his division and one of the best heavyweights of all time. I'm not saying that I predict he will, but there have been fighters in the past who don't look $1 million, but they manage to win, and they win at the highest level, at fair and square. But yeah, with David Adeleye, I see someone who I think it's quite clear he has a bit more schooling than Fabio Wardley, although I'm not entirely aware of, you know, how many amateur fights and what level he fought at. I think he probably got to like national level as an amateur. I know he was a British, he won the Bucks Championship, which is like British University Championship of Sport. So that's where all the universities in the country, they have tournaments in various sports. And I believe he was Bucks champion a few years ago, maybe 2018, around that kind of time. But you can definitely see there's a bit more polish, there's a bit more, I want to say there's a bit more schooling, a bit more understanding when it comes to David Adeleye. Just in the way he moves, his kind of shot selection, and almost like through his actions, you can kind of have a go at reverse engineering his thought process. And with David Adeleye, I think he's a bit more cerebral in the sense where he's been doing this longer. He knows what he's looking for, and he maybe has a better idea of how he's going to set up his shots. With Fabio Wardley, not that he's a slouch, because he does have skill, and he's got some pretty good skill when you consider, as I say, not very long amateur schooling. He's very much done it the hard way. I think he's learnt on the job. But one thing I feel supplements Fabio Wardley's skill set is his athleticism. Very athletic, very quick, very explosive, powerful, quite good balance as well. And you can see how it kind of upholds, it underpins a lot of his technique. So where there are some holes, he can maybe afford to get away with it. Like when he has those outbursts, those barrages of punches, you're seeing some quick shots being whipped in. It's going to be very difficult for these big guys to evade, to defend against, because he's so quick. That being said, though, I feel like I don't know how to describe this without being kind of contradicting myself, but I feel like with Fabio Wardley, he'd actually do better if he relied on his athleticism a bit more. And I say that because, you know, I'm someone who, I look at skill, I look at technique and tactics, and I love all that stuff. And you should aim to develop that. But the thing is with Fabio Wardley, does he necessarily have time? Now, he's going to get a certain amount of improvement, but it's not like he's still fighting on the small hall shows or the undercards. Well, he is fighting on undercards, but this is a big undercard, let's be real. He's very much in the spotlight now as British champion. And so the development process is going to be on fast forward a little bit. It's going to be rushed a bit more than what's ideal. And so I'm wondering, you know, I've been thinking this for a little while. Could Fabio Wardley maybe rely on his athleticism a bit more? Like kind of almost go down the David Haye route, the Adam Booth fighter route, where there's a bit more of an emphasis on athleticism. Because there are times where I look at Fabio Wardley and he can become a little bit stationary in front of his opponent. And it's I think it's times like that where he doesn't look as good. He doesn't look $1 million. That's not really where he shines, because he doesn't necessarily have that experience of, you know, using his eyes, using his feints and stuff. And he can do that stuff, but there's doing it and then there's doing it well with proficiency, with experience, time tested kind of thing. And I just feel like there have been a couple of times, I want to say, in the Michael Coffey fight and also the Nathan Gorman fight, where Fabio Wardley's kind of stagnation, his uh, kind of static posture cost him a little bit. He was easily timed, and you know, I don't think he understands the nuances, the intricacies of boxing as well. Or maybe he does know them, but he just hasn't made it second nature. Whereas with David Adeleye, even though he's still a little bit rough around the edges as well, I feel like he just has a few more wrinkles to his game. You know, he's a bit more dynamic in his guard, which in itself holds a lot of value. Even though he's not as athletic, I feel like he has a better understanding of like positioning for one. Like oftentimes I see Fabio Wardley and he'll go to use his jab, which is a decent punch, but you know, he throws it and he's still on the center line, you know, still upright, and he just eats one in return. Other times he might be walking around the ring, doesn't realize that he's in range, and you know, gets clipped with a jab, or he gets his head knocked back with a left cross or something from his opponent. It's these little things, and they add up. Of course, like when you go into a fight with an opponent who knows how to capitalize on that kind of thing, it can go really badly wrong. An example, not to say that either of these guys fight stylistically like Fabio Wardley or David Adeleye, but I always think of the Anthony Yarde versus Sergey Kovalev fight, because Anthony Yarde, you know, he had so many things in his favor: size, youth. I wouldn't say punching power, but he certainly had the power to hurt Sergey Kovalev, who had looked quite vulnerable in the years leading up to that fight. Obviously, Anthony Yarde, explosive, athletic, got skills of his own, but there has always been that lack of experience. You know, Anthony Yarde's, he hasn't been able to shake off a certain amount of greenness. And Sergey Kovalev, by that point, you know, just the epitome of a veteran, you know, been there, seen it, done it, bought the t-shirt and worn the t-shirt out. And a lot of Sergey Kovalev's success came from relatively, I want to say, low-hanging fruit, whereby Anthony Yarde would step into range and not realize that he'd stepped into range. And bang, Kovalev's just getting that jab, sticking it in his face, doubling the impact when Yarde would just walk in face first, because he hadn't had that rigorous education in kind of the fundamentals of boxing, like timing, like distance, like positioning, which, you know, you don't even have to really get to a high level of amateur boxing, you know, to learn that stuff. Sometimes it's just trial and error. You're in the gym long enough as a kid, as a teenager, as an adolescent, and you learn sometimes the hard way, a lot of the times the hard way. What I'm trying to say is I just feel like overall David Adeleye is a bit more well-rounded. I say that even though I haven't been as impressed by Adeleye as I have been by Fabio Wardley. And so I understand this is not my most academic breakdown. I am just kind of flooding you guys with thoughts, but hopefully it makes sense. Even though I'm more impressed with Fabio Wardley, or have been over the course of his career, my confidence does lie with David Adeleye a bit more in this particular fight, because Adeleye, he doesn't do much wrong, and I feel like he has developed recent years, particularly from that Sokolovsky fight. David Adeleye is quite patient. He doesn't do anything particularly wrong, as I say, a little bit rough around the edges, but it's kind of what you would expect from someone of his experience level. So where am I going with this one? I can see a points win. I can see a knockout win. I do think that this fight will bring fireworks. It's purely by virtue of the fact that we've got two young guys. They don't like each other. And there's there's a lot on the line. You know, it's a big platform. There's a much coveted British heavyweight title on the line, which has got decent form when it comes to presenting good scraps. So I think this fight will be quite a spectacle. I can see both guys having success. I'm just not sure how the fight unfolds necessarily. If we're looking at what each guy will look to impose on the other one, I think Fabio Wardley needs to loosen up a little bit. As I say, I don't like it when I see him being static. You know, he's in front of an opponent and he's just like, he's trying the patient route, but he doesn't understand that being patient, you need to be proactive alongside it. You're not just waiting for an opponent. You need to poke them, prod them, feint them, get them to do something. It's not as simple as just standing in front of them. So I want to see Fabio Wardley kind of loosen up, use the ring, get into a groove, use that athleticism, become, you know, a little bit of a David Haye, where he's maybe moving around, using his athleticism to his advantage, using the speed, the fluidity. Not to say that fight exactly like David Haye, but just be willing to trade on that athleticism a bit more. And I'm kind of thinking about the firepower that David Adeleye brings. You certainly don't want to leave your chin out to dry in front of him. He's a big guy, athletic himself, throws with decent technique as well. But I don't think he's the biggest puncher that Fabio Wardley's probably come up against. I imagine Nick Webb probably punches harder than David Adeleye. But definitely, I think Fabio Wardley will probably want to keep it long. I want to say box and move, if you will. Kind of keep David Adeleye turning. So I'm wondering about the coordination of David Adeleye. I'm sure when the pace is slower, Adelaye's form holds up. But if you look at even his physique, he's kind of all arms and legs. Like, he's got a big, bulky torso, but his arms look quite long. His legs look quite long. I don't think his legs really match his upper body. And I don't know what David Adeleye is like if you keep him turning. You know, how effective can he be? That being said, Adeleye does have a good jab. As I say, he's got those long arms, so I think he probably has a bit more ring coverage, to copy Dwyer's saying. I imagine he might be able to establish his jab over long range, not only because he can probably time it better, but maybe because he just has a bit more length, you know, a bit more ring coverage, as I say. Yeah, David Adeleye, I know he's got, 11 knockouts out of 12 wins. You know, that's decent, but I mean, I say it's decent, it's good, but the opposition has been much lower than the opposition of Fabio Wardley. And even then, Fabio Wardley still got 15 knockouts out of 16 fights. With David Adeleye, on the flip side, I think he will want Fabio Wardley to come towards him. You know, talking about David Adeleye having to keep up, I think he understands that he's going to have an easier time if Wardley comes towards him, particularly if Wardley loses his rag, which he may do. That seems to be something that he trades on quite a bit. And so, with David Adeleye, you know, he tucks up quite well, manages distance quite well, and I think he really will benefit from boxing quite a disciplined fight, where doesn't really give too much away, uses the jab mainly, just to disrupt the timing, get Wardley, you know, stick it in his face, knock him off balance with the jab, interrupt his offense with the jab, catch him off guard when Wardley walks in and doesn't really understand that he's in range. And then maybe he can draw that kind of anger out of Wardley, get him riled up. Because you have to imagine, like, the dynamic in this fight, it's interesting because there was that whole melee a few weeks back where Wardley got dropped by one of David Adelaye's guys after Adeleye antagonised him. So Wardley, he's inexperienced. He has this kind of mean, angry streak where he can fly off the handle a little bit. And it hasn't backfired yet, but you just get the feeling that it might. And on top of that, I feel like a lot of that comes from Wardley maybe going above and beyond to prove he's like, I am a real boxer. Like, forget the white collar stuff. I'm a champion. and I'm going to fight how a champion fights. And to his credit, he does. Fabio Wardley has the heart of a lion. You know, could you imagine Anthony Joshua with Fabio Wardley's heart? That's a scary fighter right there. You know, but Fabio Wardley, he's got the minerals. But is it an overcompensation? Is it an overcompensation that eventually will spell his undoing? So yeah, I think that's going to be David Adelaye's best bet, is to pick and poke. Don't be too concerned with landing the big hooks, the big right hands. Use the jab. Go backwards, manage that distance. Get Fabio Wardley to lose his rag, come in, and then you time him. You time him with a good shot, you tie him up. Because that's one thing David Adeleye seems to really have, that strength, that natural strength. He's a big natural guy, a natural unit, you know. And Fabio Wardley's strong as well. But I just feel like maybe David Adeleye is a bit solid. And maybe he can just, over the rounds, he can frustrate Fabio Wardley. When Wardley loses it, he gets timed as he comes in, and just maybe accumulates too much damage. You know, not one particular shot, but he just keeps eating them over the course of the fight. So yeah, I'm going to go David Adeleye, late stoppage. I think Wardley will go out on his shield, but I think he'll get to a point where he just maybe soaks up too much damage, and maybe his corner just like, you know what, he's in over his head a little bit. He's in against a more educated boxer. Let's take him out now and save him so he can fight another day. That's what I'm going for. David Adeleye, corner stoppage. I'm thinking round 9, round 10, maybe. Something like that. Later in the fight. All right, I think I've been going for long enough. It's at about 22 minutes now. I say it wasn't my most academic breakdown, but ended up getting fairly deep. I hope you guys enjoy this. Hopefully it's some conversation for the lack of videos I've been putting out. Been very busy recently, and this was actually supposed to be my week off, and I've got just as much work to do as I normally do. But anyway, there's something for you guys to chew on for a bit. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below, and I'll get back to you. Hopefully this fight is a good one, and it is the talk of the town rather than the main event. Let's see. All right, guys, I'll leave you with this one. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you in the next video.